Right, we are back. Sorry about obviously that game obviously crashed. Plus we were also trying to set up the new lobby. Um, so we've got to wait for everyone to be in. So it is going to take a little while, of course, um, for that. Plus the grid has to be set, of course, to the finishing order of the sprint, and then we can get racing once again, which will be a 33 lap race around Portimao. So obviously we've done 1/3 of the sprint, of course. Now we do then uh, well 33 laps of Portimao, which be a good race hopefully. So Here we go then. I believe the grid has been now set for what will be the main race. And as we get into the main race, then, well, don't forget to put on your setups. I would advise you all that. Give yourselves all a minute or two for setups. But and obviously sort your strategies out. But yeah, obviously from the last race, from the sprint, what we saw was Dan win, Bob second. Appledom did have good pace on those softs. Obviously, we don't know what he would have done on the mediums, but we will have to see. I'm sure we'll find out if he does choose to run mediums this race at some point, if he goes maybe onto the same strategy as leaders, which I think be more a bit likely now, given he's starting third. Usually that's what does happen. But yeah, so we'll just wait until the drivers obviously select setups. In terms of strategy, I think based on the sprint, obviously we saw them quite comfortably do 11 laps, so that's just under the halfway distance. I do think probably be a one-stop race, obviously. Most races in this game are, obviously, tyre wear does tend to be pretty low on this circuit. And in this game in general, like I think most of the time, if you're doing more than one stops in races on F1 24 or any probably F1 game, you're probably doing too many pit stops, but that's just how I see it. Anyway, once again, it is going to be lights out and away we go. Dan, does he get away well? Yes, he does. And Appledom, in fact, has gotten away a little bit better than Bob, who is going to be under a bit of pressure coming into turn one. But Bob, with the inside line, manages to hold off then the attack from, obviously, Appledom. Now, has Appledom started on softs, or has he started on mediums? He's actually gone for mediums then here. Now, interestingly, Bob's gone for the harder tyre, which I think is a bit of an interesting call, because the only driver on a hard tyre, well, inside the top 10 is himself. The rest are all on, obviously, mediums and softs. So we'll have to see how that affects him. Could see him be a bit compromised in these early laps with the drivers around him, as he'll certainly be on the defensive front during these opening few laps, and the drivers ahead might just streak away a bit, but that does open up his strategy for a little bit later on in the race, of course, given he'll be in a position to go on the attack later on potentially, but we'll have to wait and see. So anyway, lap then to a race. Dan leads from Appledom, then Neil, then it's Ralphie in fourth, Top Car Vlogger in fifth, and Bob already down to, well, sixth place almost, but fights back against Ralphie a lot, but this is certainly costing him time. They come together, they touch wheels, just a slight brushing of the sidewalls, and nothing drastic then there, but of course punctures could be, well, a thing. Certainly in real life it would. I'm not sure whether the game would replicate it that well, because obviously we saw a few weeks ago with Norris and Verstappen, the slightest of contacts sometimes in the Formula 1 car can have devastating consequences, of course. But that contact they managed to get away with then there. So Man's Not Bob down to fifth, struggling out early on in this race. But Lucky Egg then going to be the next driver, looking to get past then the Aston Martin for what would be then sixth place then here in the race. DRS is active, of course, after the first lap in this game, of course. And in Formula 1 in 2024, which therefore makes it a little bit more difficult for drivers in terms of, well, they have to break that 1 second window a lot sooner if you do want to break it, of course. And you can't rely on, well, staying, you know, not within that 1 second. You've got to break that 1 second a lot sooner now compared to before, which does make life a little bit more difficult at the sharp end, especially if you want a cleaner race, whereas before you had about 2 laps to get out of that 1 second window, and DRS wouldn't have been active for the first 2 laps until lap 3. So with that in mind, it's a lot obviously easier a year back, but they did change it, that rule and regulation, for the purposes of trying to make racing a little bit closer, and I think it has worked. I think in real life it works a little bit better. I think in also the game it works better, of course. Maybe in the game it works a bit too well, in my opinion, if I'm being brutally honest. But in real life it does work a little bit better, as in just we see a little bit less dominance now in that regard due to it. Anyway, lap then 4. Manzanar Bob, 5 seconds adrift, and this is what I mean. For Bob, he's already 5 seconds off the lead of what the leaders are currently on. Meanwhile, Dandan and Appledorn battle away. Gavin, the first driver then in this race, to pick up a 3-second time penalty. Of course, I think there's going to be plenty of those today. This track is notorious for time penalties. And actually, it's not really the track, it's just really turn 1 and turn 2 probably out of all the turns, because they're so difficult turns to take side by side, or, you know, even to get through them on your own. It's very easy to drift a little bit out wide and basically understeer and go off the track and pick up a very cheap, obviously, track limit warning. Also, another turn you probably want to look out for is that turn we just seen over the top of the hill. And that turn, again, is another turn that can be pretty notorious and difficult for, obviously, the drivers, and remaining on the track and keeping the track, keeping within the track limits. So there are a few corners here that can catch you out in terms of full track limits. LCC becomes the next driver to pick up those 3 seconds. So lap then 5 of 33. And the one thing I was saying, and I've said, races in this game do go awfully a lot quicker than I personally feel they used to. So, used to be feeling a lot slower, they did. I feel like if we were on F1 23, probably be on lap, I don't know, probably 4 right now, or just ending lap 5. We're already on halfway around lap 5, so I feel like there is a lot quicker races these days. Also, less safety cars. You know, a lot less safety cars now in the game, it feels, which it's okay, actually, in my opinion. Obviously, it does mean less jeopardy, ultimately. So Bob is back up into 5th, but is 6.3 seconds behind her. We see then Lucky Egg overtaking the Rebel driver Vanille for what is then 6th place, and gets ahead then of Morgan. Not Neil. Neil's up in 3rd. My apologies. So, yeah, that's Morgan and Lucky Egg swapping position then there for what is 6th place. As they chasing down Ralphie. Ralphie, now, I'm not going to lie, he did very well in the one-shot qualifying, but I don't think he's done that great in the main races so far. In the sprint, did he get the tyre strategy wrong? I'm not entirely sure. Like, in theory, no. Just didn't keep up with the leaders. And again, here in the main race, not really keeping up with the leaders, to be exact. Like, yeah, I'm not saying he's slow or anything. He's obviously not. He's inside the top 4, but been a bit of a strange one for him, I feel, so far. Meanwhile, Appledorm and obviously Dandan, 5.8 seconds clear up the road. Currently, right now, trailing each other. For a few laps though, that battle for first has settled down. So I feel like Appledorm is happy to play second fiddle there and basically, not go basically faster than obviously Dandan. Basically, he's happy to play the number 2 at the moment in that battle, I just feel, which ultimately makes sense, because sometimes, if I'm being truthful, you don't want to fight your rival. You want to sometimes let your rival pull you along. I don't know if any of you watch, obviously, IndyCar. If you do, then fair enough. But we see it from Scott Dixon so often, who is one of maybe the greatest IndyCar drivers of all time, if not the greatest, potentially. And we see it so often from Scott Dixon in obviously, what is a series? That is effectively obviously a spec series, so everyone has the exact same car, but we see it so often from Scott. He always is so good in the element of fuel saving. If you want a fuel saver in your car, he's the driver to be that driver. And, what he'll do, he'll just sit behind drivers for quite a long time, and obviously quite often won't really fight will only fight when he needs to fight, get his elbows out. But when he doesn't need to fight, he'll let the driver in front do the work for him, which is one of the most intelligent things you'll see, actually. And right now, obviously, that's appearing what Appledorm is exactly doing. Letting Dandan do the work, put in the hard yards, and for now, obviously, is happy to sit there in second place, behind, obviously, Dandan, and obviously let him carry, obviously, himself along, and obviously is carrying Neil along. Now, Neil, I do expect, might drop off a bit soon, obviously sooner rather than later on these guys. Obviously, it'll be interesting to see what tyre Neil selects in his pit stops. Does he go for the hards? I think he might. I think that will be the strategy, obviously, he's going to have to go for. I don't think there's a chance of him getting mediums to the end. It'll be also interesting to see what Bob does. Is he going to do a reversal of what Neil is doing? Hard softs. Like, in theory, I think it is a viable strategy, as we've seen that Bob go down the inside at turn 1. Little bit of contact maybe between himself and Ralphie, but it is more or less a clean move and no major issue, I don't think, for them to. Does Ralphie have damage? I'm not sure, but of course, what I am sure about is Man's Not Bob up into 4th place now, and that's probably exactly what he needed to do on this lap, was to get past now and start maybe trying to bridge that gap back down to the leaders, and obviously try and get himself back into the top 3 battle at least. But he is 8.1 seconds adrift at the moment, which is a bit of a gap to claw back. It isn't going to be easy for himself here then. So he does have a lot of work to go and do. That gap is now up to 8.4, and it still might increase actually, despite that pass. But it is going to be a chance actually here for Ralphie to just get a little bit back at Bob here. Obviously, he's not quite broken that 1 second, Bob hasn't, so therefore DRS is going to be enabled. Could we see maybe 2 overtakes for 1 for Lucky Egg here? No, not quite, but Lucky Egg, I think, is going to go for it. Down the inside, Lucky Egg going to go. Ralphie a little bit off the track, but Bob almost getting taken out by Lucky Egg there. Lucky Egg had to swerve off the track a little bit, or out of the way, to avoid the collision. But yeah, for obviously Lucky Egg in then sixth then there. Man's Not Bob has gone deep. This allows Lucky Egg a foot in the door. Can he convert it around the outside? He's going to try and do just that, but in the end, it's the inside line there being the more favourable line to have. But this has certainly cost Man's Not Bob some credible time to the race leaders. It's now, well, that gap to the race leaders for him is up to 10 seconds. So for Bob, I definitely think this has been the wrong strategy here, because even 10 seconds, that is a lot of time to make up to the top 3 then, and top 2. So, yeah, for Bob, not ideal. For car number 69, Dandan now has been overtaken by, obviously, Appledorm. Appledorm now is your new race leader, and he's now going to try and set the pace. And he's been, obviously, as I say, been sat there for quite a long time, been sat there for a number of laps, playing that second driver role to, obviously, Dandan, and now he's pounced. But can he break, obviously, that 1 second window and barrier? It's going to be difficult for the Haas driver, especially given the tyre length that, obviously, they're on now. They're on lap 11, worn old tyres, with still a good number of laps to go. Now, imagine the pit stop window will be lap 16, maybe a little bit before that, maybe around lap 14, I would suspect. But obviously, we've got a few laps probably before that pit stop window opens up for these medium runners. For the soft, obviously, tyre, I imagine they're probably going to, obviously, well, for Neil, I imagine he's going to be probably coming into pit maybe within the next 1 or 2 laps. Do we see a reaction to, obviously, Neil? Do we see, obviously, Appledorm, Dandan react to Neil on what he's doing? Or do we, obviously, see them just continue on and ignore Neil for a few laps? Which I think we might see. But, yeah, that pit stop window for Neil might be just open, actually, at the moment. And for Bob, he's picked up a penalty, so Bob definitely out this now race for the win here, you'd have to conclude, though. But for, obviously, Ralphie, he's actually pulled a bit of a gap now to, obviously, 5th, and to the top house flogger, who right now is in, obviously, 5th place. So the battle behind him has compromised Bob's race quite severely, but has worked out for, obviously, Ralphie in the last few laps. Obviously, Ralphie is catching now Neil, and in fact, that could be a battle to watch out for at the end of the race. I believe we've got a few battles here. We've got a battle for 3rd and 4th. We've got a battle, certainly, for the race win at the moment on the cards. So, there is still a long way to go, though, in this race as they cross the line for the 13th time. And Dandan going to take back the lead. Then here on lap 13. Lucky for some, unlucky for others, as they say. Is lap 13 going to be the lucky lap for Dandan today? Or is it going to be the lap that's actually unlucky for him? So, there's the tyre performance graph. Now, I've never actually seen that before. So, according to the tyre performance, actually, it's pretty even between the drivers in terms of their tyre performance and what they've got left in those tyres. So, yeah, it is pretty even at the moment. So, that's obviously, I suppose, good news for us. It is not just an even fight as we're seeing right now on the track, but also, like, in terms of what both drivers have got at their deployment, it is literally nothing really to separate them. So, yeah, that is obviously that tyre graphic, which I think is nice to see. So Man's Not Bob has now re-overtaken Lucky Egg. This time has managed to just pull out a slender lead and broken that DRS of 1 second. That's going to see then Lucky Egg under pressure, as we have now seen Neil dart off into the pits after 13 laps on those tyres. And there we go. So now, obviously, the first pit stop window is open. Now, do we see an immediate reaction from the two race leaders? Or are they going to go and just stay on their own sort of strategy here? I think, personally, if I was them, or in their sort of shoes, I would be doing the latter. I'd be doing, you know, our own strategy, staying on that. I wouldn't react to, obviously, Neil, not because I don't consider him a threat, just because I think ultimately he's obviously probably not going to be as big of a threat. But the interesting thing is here, he's gone for mediums, not for the hards. Now, that is a very brave call because there is still a good 20 laps to go. So maybe are we going to see, well, mediums do 20 laps here. If he can, well, if he believes he can get mediums to the end of the race, I mean, it is a very plausible strategy that we're going to see a medium soft run race, which ultimately is probably now doable based on that. Maybe we'll have to see. Obviously, we have to see when do these medium runners stop. Obviously, like, so far the longest medium stint is 14 laps, obviously. Well, make it 15 by the time this lap ends. But could we see that medium soft strategy for the rest of the grid? I honestly do not know. Obviously, we have seen Top Car Flogger go from, obviously, I think it was softs to hards, or whatever it was. Lange has also gone to the mediums. So there are a few drivers, and Nagel has gone medium. So there's plenty of drivers sticking on the mediums then for what probably should be our final stint of the race. Unless it's a two-stop race, is the faster way. I'm not entirely sure what is the strategic option here. But for at least now, it does look like we are into that medium soft strategy at the moment. So lap 16 of the race. Appledorn has lost a little bit of touch to the race leader of Dandan. Dandan certainly putting on maybe a little bit of a charge now. Which, yeah, for obviously Dandan means he is pulling out a little bit of a gap, but a little bit of DRS actually there for Dandan, which does help him just not be caught there down that next straight, which actually could help him a lot here in the middle sector, because rather than that gap probably coming down to under half a second, it's actually remained over 0.6 of a second. So if he can pull out just about 0.4 on this lap, there's every chance Dandan could actually manage to escape that 1 second DRS window, which therefore would obviously help him an awful lot in terms of not getting caught. It's about up to 0.9. We're coming up to that DRS window then there, and it's now over a second, so the gap is just gone up to a second. So I think Appledorn might not have DRS here, and if that's the case, that could be a very crucial change and dynamic in this race. Of course, he might get DRS back due to the slipstream effect that obviously we'll get. That gap's just come back down to under a second now, back down to within obviously 0.7. I think though Appledorn has had to use a bit of his energy recovery system to bring that gap down though, but he has got the DRS, which could be a crucial thing in this race for him. Can he get it back down to about 0.6 or under that? What's the gap down to here? It's still over 0.6 of a second, so this is really bad news for Appledorn. So it is imperative Appledorn stays within that 1 second window right now, because if he doesn't stay within the 1 second, that is not ideal. So we are on lap 17 of this race. Obviously, right now, Neil is, well, in 7th, 31 seconds off the leaders. There is a potential he does come back out as your new race leader. Once again, that gap's definitely now up to 1 second, as we do have a yellow flag out in Sector 1, but it's only momentarily out there then. So, obviously, right now, does look like Dandan's in control and starting to just take the ultimate control of this race. And we are actually getting very close to that, obviously, that strategy I was talking about, where drivers probably could start thinking about the softs at this rate. For obviously a lot of them, definitely the hard runners can do that one-stop strategy. So, Man's Not Bob undoubtedly can do the one-stop here, but obviously Dandan and for Appledom, given that they can do a one-stop, I think that is well, just shows potentially how wrong maybe Man's Not Bob strategy selection has been today. Because obviously for Man's Not Bob, he was up there with the front drivers, and he certainly probably had the pace to contend for the win today. But going for the hard tyre, clearly a fundamental error, obviously, today. And if the medium runners can do a one-stop, obviously, in this race, then they have really benefited from that. And as we go on to lap 18, we're probably only 1 lap away from that one-stop window being opened for the medium soft tyre. Obviously, therefore, it is looking increasing likely and beneficial strategy to select in this race. And the thing about this, Neil hasn't taken much actually out of the race leaders. He's only got the gap down to about 31.6 seconds, which I think will still see the leaders come out ahead of him by at least a couple seconds. So Neil hasn't really, made the impact into the race leaders, races here. It's just been one of them races, but still a long way to go. Anything can happen. Well, when I say a long way to go, there's approximately 14 laps to go, which, well, do we see an early stop? Do we see maybe Appledorm come in? And he has actually closed that gap on Dandan this lap, so who's going to blink first? Is it going to be Appledorm? Is it going to be Dandan? Or are they both going to just go in at the same time? Neither of them come into the pits then. Yeah, they both make it onto lap 20 without any issues, and that means then we are now into that soft tyre territory where both drivers can happily probably fit on the soft tyre without any hesitation. So I think for Man's Not Bob, you know what? If I was Bob right now, I would pit this lap, and I'll tell you why. Because ultimately, if Ralphie doesn't pit, then you will undercut him, and you'll gain a bit of time back. And also the other reason I had to do that stop now is simply because ultimately, either way, you're going to be on the same strategy. So even if his tyres are 1 lap younger or 2 laps younger, I think you can defend that personally. That's just my personal opinion. I think personally, to recover his race, he needs to do something a little bit bold. Well, how can I put it? Through selecting the hard tyre, he's gone conservative, if you know what I mean. At the start of the race, it hasn't worked out, that conservative strategy. Whereas now, he needs to probably go a bit more, aggressive and be a bit more on the attack rather than hold back. And that's what he needs to do then here. As we do go on to lap 21 of the race, but then again, it's his call. He doesn't come into the pits, and if obviously Ralphie did want to come into the pits there, with obviously Bob on the inside line, that meant Ralphie had to obviously compromise and didn't do that quite. But we have got a pit stop, and I imagine it is Lucky Egg then coming in. It is indeed, and is this going to be for a soft set of tyres? I would have thought so. On goes the soft. And there we go. So Lucky Egg into the pits and is now going to come back out. But is a long way behind Neil. And he's going to be ahead of Morgan with significantly better tyres. Does he get ahead of Airman here? No, not quite. But does have significantly better tyres than the two cars obviously ahead of him. But he is the first driver to now pit. And obviously right now he's fighting Top Car Flogger for what would be probably 5th. He's probably also fighting Morgan as well. So right now this is probably the battle for 6th place maybe here. At the moment I'm considering, as the two leaders are in then. So Appledorn does get into the pits first and is ahead, but also Dandan is in. So are we going to see then Bob continue on? Bob is continuing on for another lap. Does Ralphie continue on? Yes, he does. So Ralphie not actually going with the two race leaders, deciding to continue with obviously Bob for now, but he must feel confident in that. And it looks like actually Appledorn's had the significantly better pit stop than there. He's managed to pull out a 1.3 second advantage ahead of him, but it does have obviously Top Car Flogger, which he is going to come, Top House Flogger. He is going to come to the back of Top House Flogger very, very quickly. How quickly can he dispatch the Williams driver is probably going to be key. If he can dispatch him straight away, then his lead will probably remain about 1.3 seconds, but if he cannot, it might just evaporate as quickly as he gained it. Is he going to manage to get past the Williams? He's certainly hustling the back of the Williams driver here. Can he maybe just send one down the inside? Not quite, thinks better of it. Doesn't want to risk it, but you can see what I mean. That lead then for what was Appledorn of about 1.3 seconds that he gained over that pit stop phase has just now already evaporated for then the race leader, the net race leader then here, whilst Bob is the current race leader. And they go again. But this is the net race lead. And yeah, pretty much, well, Dandan's going to take then P3 here potentially. Off then Appledorn. Well, no, not quite. Appledorn manages just to hold on to 3rd place. So lap 23 of 33. So the new race leader, obviously Bob, continuing on for a 23rd lap. Now I'm not really sure what Bob's thinking actually is now. Ralphie's thinking I get, kind of, go with Bob if you've got the pace, fair enough. But I don't get what, obviously, Bob's thinking is, continuing on, because surely this is helping Ralphie more than anything else. That's just my thinking towards all of this. And if anything, it's not helping the drivers exactly behind him. Is he thinking maybe he can get Neil during the latter part of this race? Right now that gap is 14.5 seconds. It's about a 30-second pit loss. Almost, just under. There is every chance as Ralphie does come in. Now, where does Ralphie now come back out? Appledorn takes the fastest lap of the race. So where does obviously Ralphie come out? He's going to come out behind Neil, I suspect, by quite a considerable distance. I want to see where, if he does come out. Does he come out ahead of Lucky Egg? Yes, he does, by quite a nice margin. There's Lucky Egg in the background, who is just approaching turn 1. And there is then Ralphie into turn 2. So the gap between them, what will be 4th and 3rd, is about 10 seconds. 10 laps to go, 10 laps fresher tyres. That is the circumstances for obviously Ralphie and Neil. That battle certainly could be a battle to watch, which actually could become a 3-car battle towards the end of the race. The thing is though, Lucky Egg was pretty marginal with obviously Ralphie there. Is that going one extra lap beyond obviously Ralphie? Is that going to be the difference? A little bit tentative also into the pits for Bob. Certainly didn't want to pick up a speeding in the pit lane penalty, which I think is now in this game 10 seconds for the speeding in the pit lane. So you definitely don't want to pick up one of those. But here's then Bob. Where does he re-emerge? Now, does he get ahead of, obviously, Ralphie? I don't think he will. But does he get ahead, more importantly, of Lucky Egg? And the answer to that is no. Lucky Egg ahead, then, of Man's Not Bob. And I tell you what, it is 4 laps better tyres, or 5 laps, as they start this lap. But the difficulty is, Lucky Egg is a fighter and not a quitter. He will certainly fight with Man's Not Bob. He's not afraid, and that could be a tough battle for Bob to even still get past the Alpine driver, despite having better tyres. We will keep an eye on it, but the gap has obviously been immediately reduced. So, does Lucky Egg fight Bob here? Does he try and hold up obviously, the Aston Martin driver, or does he just see this one not worthwhile? Obviously, we'll have to wait and see, but either way, does obviously still hinder, obviously, Bob a little bit, because he's having to compromise himself. Goes to the inside, Bob does. Now, got the DRS as well, and can easily make the pass up into then what will be 5th place, and is ahead then of the car that was in 5th, Lucky Egg, momentarily. But yeah, gap now is 2 seconds to Ralphie. Does have about a lap better off in tyre wear, but obviously for them to then, I suppose their aim is to try and finish this race ahead of Neil. For obviously Ralphie, I do think it's doable. 6 seconds is the gap then, but that gap is still a big gap between the drivers. Obviously we know mediums can probably do about 22 laps here. So, it's going to be the first, basically, 6 or 7 laps will determine this outcome. And this battle for, obviously, these drivers. Right now, what has the gap come down to this lap? It's come down by about half a second. It is going to be enough to catch, but I don't think it's going to be a very quick catch, actually, to be fair. Still 6 seconds. I'm going to get that gap up, actually, the gap to the interval, which shows you the gap, and it's reduced by. So we're going to keep an eye on it each lap then. Really, ideally, well, with 6 laps to go, Ralphie needs to be gaining about a second per lap, effectively. Right now, this lap down to about 5.3. So, that's good, but it's whether or not you can gain about a second per lap. This lap has done just that. So, this lap is certainly within that, obviously, range and where it needs to be. Obviously, maybe a little bit more than a second a lap needs to be gaining. Might want to be gaining about a second and a half a lap. In terms of penalties, let's have a look. Only 3 seconds for Bob, so for Bob, it's not that bad, actually. Considering all. He's got the pace, for sure. So, lap 28. 5 laps to go. Then. And right now the gap ahead is 4.4 seconds. So here we go then. Battle for then what right now is 4th place. And Man's Not Bob up into 4th. And Ralphie did defend to the inside a little bit, but in the end Bob much more confident on the brakes by the looks of it. And gets the pass done pretty solidly then there. The only thing, these two drivers don't want to fight too much. Want to just work a little bit as a team to catch at least, obviously, Bob, especially Ralphie. Ralphie's the one with the most to lose here, I feel. Whilst Neil is in a good position, but he is being caught quite quickly. I reckon he'll be caught by maybe the end of next lap. Man's not Bob. He's going to be in position to potentially be within Neil's DRS. We'll have to obviously wait and see on that, as obviously Ralphie now re-overtakes then Bob. Bob goes down the inside. This is what they don't want to do, is battle with each other. This is the last thing that obviously either driver can actually be doing then here. Neither driver picked up the DRS, but yeah, that's not what they want to do. Bob has cost a little bit of time then to potentially Neil then there. And for Neil, this might have bought him an extra lap. And if it has bought him an extra lap, of course, that's a devastating blow to obviously, well, Ralphie in particular, because Ralphie is the one right now looking down the barrel at what will be potentially a third place in this race. Not Bob. Bob, bear in mind, got a 3-second penalty. So for Neil, he will go on to this next lap, lap 30, with a 1.4 second advantage. But he will also go on to lap 40 with the two cars behind battling each other and not giving each other much quarter, to say the very least. Bob certainly not helping Ralphie out all too much. Certainly thinking a lot of himself, you could say here, potentially. As Bob then gonna go for the overtake, is he? No, not quite. Bob decides on this occasion to just hold off his charge. And now they're within that 1 second of Neil. Now, how does Neil defend what is effectively two steam trains coming at him at the speed of, well, basically at the speed of light? That is what they've got. How does obviously Neil defend that? I don't think there is a way for Neil to defend it on 16-lap-old mediums versus 6-lap-old softs. And for Bob's case, obviously, those are a lot younger as well. But he does have a lot of ERS to deploy if he wants to deploy it. And is he going to deploy it? I think the answer to that is yes. But can he obviously use that ERS to deploy it enough to maybe try and defend off the battle? Is it going to mean he'll survive at least one DRS straight? Yes, he will. So he's used pretty much all his battery there in defence, but it is going to be probably now, surely, the time. Neil is going to be on the inside. Ralphie goes off the track ever so slightly. Can, obviously, Neil defend down into the hairpin? They go. Little bit of contact was there between the Sauber and, obviously, Red Bull might have been. Neil actually gets handed back the position by Ralphie. Ralphie doesn't take the position there. And in fact, handed Neil up the position. So Neil is getting his elbows out here. But of course, is this just all a bit futile for obviously Neil's sake? Obviously, more contact made. And, well, was that a bit of front wing damage for Bob? I'm not sure. But nonetheless, Neil then, second time around, surely can't defend this attack. Surely it'll be an attack one too many for the Red Bull driver. He is giving it his go. And certainly trying his utmost. But as they get to the next braking zone, Neil's gone deep again. Now, if Ralphie's learned anything, take the inside line. Should probably be able to pass on the inside, and he does. Does he go deep? Does he keep it on the track? No, he doesn't. Now, surely he's got to hand back the position. Yes, he does. And for, obviously, Ralphie, this must be incredibly frustrating, stuck behind what is a car you know seconds a lap slower than you, and this is allowing, actually, Man's Not Bob in with a chance of finishing on the podium here, actually, given it's only a 3-second penalty for the car ahead of Neil. So, for, obviously, Neil, this, well, I know for Neil, he might want to also try and take this podium away, but surely it's a stretch too far, given the tyre deficit and the differences in the tyres between them. Dandan picks up a 3-second penalty, meaning Appledorm is probably going to become your race winner today. But this lap, well, Neil is still within 1.8 seconds. So, I tell you what, this is going to be a very interesting race to the end of the race. Obviously, for Neil, he's still got every chance of doing this, but there goes Ralphie down the inside. Right, third time lucky. Surely for Ralphie, keep it on the track, can he? Yes, he does, and he's through. He's through on Neil. Now, this is where he needs to not let Neil come back at him. Neil's going to sweep around the outside. There's contact between them. A little bit of contact between the two, but that's also pushed. Then Ralphie outside the 3-second window. Bob is within the 3-second window, but it's Appledorm who's going to claim the win in Portugal. Driven a brilliant race with Dandan to take the win by a country mile. Appledorm crosses line, wins round 3. Dandan comes home second. Who's going to finish in third? Is it going to be Bob? For now, Bob is right now clear enough, but it's going to be a close one to the line. Bob does have 3 seconds. Is Ralphie going to finish within 3 seconds? The answer to that is no. Misses out by 53 thousandths. Neil finishes in 5th. Lucky Egg is 6th. It is Top House Vlogger crossing the line in 7th. Morgan in then what will be 9th. 10th will be Airman for Sauber. Good result for Sauber. Good result for Red Bull as well. There is Hasenagel in 10th. FCS and Shade comes home in 11th. Finishes actually inside top 10 due to whatever penalties Nagel had. Elliott then going across the line in 12th. I think. Let's have a look at penalties. Let's have a lot of penalties. So it might not be 12th. I think it might be obviously 13th. Stewart manages 12th. We'll go through the rest of the grid in a short second or two. So, didn't mean to skip the podium celebration there. Usually I like showing you the podium celebration. Anyway, Appledorm takes then the victory by 3.7 seconds. Then it is Man's Not Bob. Apparently he did forget to put a setup on, which if he did, then fair enough. Third place is a brilliant result. But either way, I do think he probably got the strategy wrong, also tyre strategy today. But third place for for Man's Not Bob, good result for him. Ralphie is 4th, then Neil is 5th. Lucky Egg is 6th, then 7th is Top House Vlogger, 8th we have then Morgan, 9th we have Emin, and then FCS and Shade inside the top 10. Outside the top 10 we have Hasenagel, then it's Stewart, then Elliott, then Lange in 14th. 15th we have Brian, Top Car Vlogger is in 16th, and Tom is in 17th. Gavin is in 18th, and finally we have LCC in 19th. So that has been obviously your ERL round 3 race today. I hope you've enjoyed the Portuguese Grand Prix. It was a good Grand Prix overall. Not as many battles as maybe last week. You know, could we see last week it was absolutely crazy, the battling that was going on around Austria. But it was still a good race, lots to take from it, and well, we are now starting to get more deeper into the championship, of course. Which next week I will go through the championship order, of course. Due to the fact now we're going to be on round 4 of what is it? Round 4 of about 12, I think. So it's a 12 race calendar, isn't it? So yeah, round 4, I think probably about the right time to go through the calendar. But yeah, thank you for obviously watching, and until next week, have a great week, of course. See you next week, Monday, for another obviously ERL race at Belgium. See you all then.